Welcome to Toasting the Classics, the podcast where we hang out and we talk about things and we don't drink anything because this is sober shorts. This is going to be a short one. I invited back the same cast from the other. The last one was me, David McArthur.
Me, Kevin Doyle.
And Bill Hodges.
So we're back again. I am continuing to work my way through my sort of randomly compiled IMDb watch list, and I sent out a message to see if you guys would be interested in watching the 1985, was going to say blockbuster. I think it was a blockbuster. It was a blockbuster. 1985.
Did pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, I think it did, especially like versus its budget. This is the 1985 movie Commando, starring Arnold. We have actually done an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie before on the podcast, so he is back. Had you guys seen this one before?
Yeah, it'd been a minute since I'd seen this.
Like
and
many minutes.
Many minutes. You know, I went back, I watched it twice, a bit of spare time. He did get to use what came to be, I guess, his line, "I'll be back." And this is only like a year or so after the Terminator.
After Terminator, right. So he says, "I'll be back" in the Terminator when he goes to the police station. Then he says it in this one when he's gonna come back and get Bennett later. Does he use it in like Total Recall and the other movies?
I think he does. I feel like it became kind of a coined expression.
It was
that he tries to
definitely
fit in.
it was definitely his thing, but I can't remember if he actually used it in, say, Running Man or I mean, what are the classic big Arnold movies, right? Obviously Terminator, and I think we can say the Terminator movies, right? I always thought Running Man is one of them. Does he say "I'll be back" in Predator?
I'm not sure, but I know that he said it in other movies for sure. I just don't think it's been every single one.
So here it is. He has said "I'll be back" in all 6 Terminator movies and then 8 other movies where he says it.
Oh,
so it's quite a few.
Same. It's just them rehashing the 80s, again, just dipping into the nostalgia, trying to mine our childhood for money.
Well, it's actually to sort of bring it back to talking about Commando. This film was made for $10 million and it made $80 million. That is impossible today. You cannot make a big budget movie for anything like $10 million. And that is why we're just seeing rehashes of stuff from the 80s. They can't afford to invest $150 million in something original. They just can't. It would be crazy. It's sad, but that's the reality. You just do another Red Hulk Marvel movie instead of something like new, and nobody's taking any chances because of the economics of the situation, which really does create a lot of suck. What did you guys think of this one? Speaking of suck.
Speaking of suck.
Have you guys seen First Blood Part 2?
Yes.
But
I was a kid. Yeah. And I don't remember. There was some comparisons between the two films, right? Between Commando.
Well, the whole structure of the Colonel coming back to get John out of retirement, Same character name. Now, granted, this is John Matrix instead of John Rambo. But,
Great name, by the way. Just great writing to name a guy John Matrix. That's a name. If I had $1 for every guy I've met whose last name was Matrix, oh, wait, I'd be poor because that's not a name.
You'd have $1.
Why would you name somebody Matrix? That's the worst name.
Rambo isn't that much better, but Rambo actually is a last name.
I've known some Rambos. I worked with a Rambo.
Well, I always figured it was sort of a play on the French poet, right? Rambo.
Yes, like Beau is how it's usually spelled. It was Americanized.
But the First Blood 1 is just hands
That's a classic we should consider, by the way.
That is a very good movie, and that is way, way better. That should not even be mentioned in the same breath as this movie.
No.
So just the fact that Rambo 2 is based on First Blood makes it a better movie because it's just got better source material. So, I mean, it's a short stuff, so we don't have too much time. So I'm just going to get right into it. I was kind of digging the movie for the first 40 minutes or so. I was putting myself in the 80s and just enjoying an 80s film and stuff. It was the second half where it just kind of really mediocre and the ending was just awful. Like the last couple of minutes. Oh my God, it looked like something from an episode of Baywatch, like the quality of the show. Like it was so bad.
Really bad, really bad. They tried, like they did try, but like it just didn't have the depth, and it just it didn't bring everything together right. Like and just like little things for me, it was the little things that irritated me. I guess I've just gotten so used to movies that connect a little bit better. But like, why did he tear the chair out of her car? What the heck?
So it was so that he could be down and not be seen.
Well, but they
because they were
didn't play to
following.
that at all. Like,
Well, but so I got that. Like he rips out the chair, and I was like, yeah, okay, so he can hide down. But then they showed them driving down the road, and he's just sitting up
he's
and
just sitting up the whole freaking
gigantic
time.
Arnold. I kept thinking
And
about
he's
that
doing
during.
this all the time too, like raising his head up and looking around. He
I
wasn't like
kept thinking about that in this movie, and it reminded me of Terminator, right? Because he's stealthing around all the time in this movie. He's sneaking through the mall and trailing people, and he's like sneaking onto bases and stuff. And I'm like, he's freaking 6'6" and weighs like 300 pounds. He's the worst person in the world to sneak
yeah.
any or not be noticed. I really thought that was funny about Terminator because they were like, yeah, we designed these machines to be able to blend into human society. And I was like, you made them look like Arnold Schwarzenegger? That's the worst choice. I thought
But
the girl was, I think once I realized she was going to be in the movie is where they started losing me. That's where I was like, she doesn't belong in this movie. It's
well, they
terrible.
needed a female,
I don't think they did. I think this
no,
could
they
have
totally didn't. They didn't. But
does Rambo have like a random person tag along with him for
in part two,
he
yes,
does. Okay. All
he
right.
does pick up like a local Vietnamese woman. Yeah, and there's some depth there, but like like they try to pair them up, and then she ends up dying though, which I think is better. But they decided to go with fun with Commando, and I get that. And they didn't take themselves too seriously. I get that. Brought in actors. Who, like the guy who Warriors, where he clinks the
Well,
bottle.
yeah, David Patrick Kelly. I had to look up his name. He's in a bunch of things, and I know him, and I've looked up and then forgotten the actor's name multiple times. But yeah, he's very
And
distinctive. He was in Dreamscape, which I really liked when I was a kid.
yes, that's right. He was the
He's
killer in
like you said, he was in Warriors. He's in a couple things, and he's always creepy.
He
Just
does a
it's
good
not his
creepy.
fault. He's just creepy looking.
He
So,
is. He's like he'd make a good like worm tongue. Like yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
This movie was going okay for me, and I think it started to lose me when they brought the girl in, and then when she blew up a police car with a rocket launcher is where it jumped the shark for me. And after that point, I was just like,
We're just like yeah. There was just
come
yeah.
on, man.
Why
Like
did she blow that up? Like she could have killed him.
it sort of stretched credulity that she would go along with helping him find his daughter at all. And then she
Yeah,
went to the point of like potentially murdering two policemen with a rocket launcher in
right.
order to help him find. And it's just
After blowing up a
what is
movie
happening?
theater, firing it the wrong direction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she just turns into a homicidal psychopath all of a sudden. It really was stretched. I don't know.
So bad. Oh, I had
How
a
about
real
you,
hard
Bill?
time
How about you,
watching it.
Bill? What'd you think?
I mean, yes, totally over the top. It's interesting that Arnie basically like had to try in all his might, and he talks a bit about this in the documentary that he did recently about his life and about this kind of competition with Sylvester Stallone
Mhm.
around the one-upsmanship, the pure machismo that was emanating because they ate too much beef. Line from the movie. The two of them really did that a lot. Like Sylvester Stallone, through all the Rambo films and all the other stuff that he did, Arnie just feeling the need, like he had to be better. He had to show up Sylvester Stallone, and there was this huge competition between these two guys throughout the course of the 80s and all of these ridiculously over the top flicks.
It's funny, but I feel like the jury's kind of still out on the conversation between Stallone and Arnold, if you think about it, because it's like obviously Stallone starts his career in a completely different league than where Arnold ever was in his entire life, right? I mean, he
Oh
wrote
yeah,
Rocky himself. He was a serious
right,
Yes,
actor,
100%.
really
director.
talented, really, really talented guy, right? Um,
Mhm.
Versus this bodybuilder, right?
versus the guy who's just a bodybuilder. But then as Arnold's career goes on, and you can see even in this, it's like I was asking myself, is he a bad actor? Because sometimes he looks terrible, but he really has this presence about his face where you're like, this is a movie star quality about this guy. There's something about the way he's using his eyes and some. Now there's some scenes where, and I think he did this on purpose because I think he's pretty smart actually. He knows he's not a great actor. So he does this thing. I talked about it before in the podcast. It's called the Kuleshov effect, where you can just show something and people will impart their own perceptions onto what you're doing so you don't act. It's like Darth Vader's face can look angry, scared, upset, depending on what's happening
Music,
around him and the
lighting,
musical cues and lighting. Right.
context. Yeah.
And I think Arnold knows that, and he's doing that in this movie a couple of times because there's a couple of times, like the opening montage with Alyssa Milano, where they're feeding a deer, and then she smashes ice cream on his face. That looked like an imitation of a bad montage in a parody movie. Like where they're putting the ice cream on it. I feel like in Naked Gun they do kind of a send up of there's an ice cream scene just like that in Naked Gun, but
Well,
anyway.
I kind of feel like that's what Lester was going for in a way, right? The director of the film just was just like, how can we? Well, oh yes, of course he's this great father, and but also he's the woodsman, and he's big and strong, and he's ex special.
I really wish I'd kept track of the number of times they have him lift something. Like just show like an immense feat of strength.
The muscles, yeah.
Which is sounds ridiculous. If I told you, oh, there's this movie and there's a bodybuilder who stars in it and they're going to have him lift things, I'd be like, that's terrible. But it's actually kind of entertaining how they make it work in the movie a couple of times. Like it's kind of running gag to me a little bit. Oh, he's carrying a tree on top of his back. And then he picks up a guy inside a phone booth and throws him away, tears the seat out of the car. And there's like 6 or 7 times where it's just ridiculous.
The Chevy Blazer at the beginning where he's like, I'm gonna
Oh
get this.
yeah. When he flips the car back over. Right? Yeah, after David Patrick Kelly crashes. Yeah, it sounds like we're kind of dogging this movie pretty bad so far. But what were you guys' favorite parts? What worked?
Go ahead. Nobody.
So
Crickets.
growing up, I was on Team Stallone, right? When I saw this even originally in the 80s, I had a hard time with it because I saw it as this grab for Stallone's crown of the 80s, action film.
Yeah,
But kind of coming back, I mean, it is quintessential Schwarzenegger. It's
this one is in a lot of ways. Yeah,
yeah.
and this is
I mean,
more.
the quotables for me,
Really, yeah, the quotes are the quote. There's some good ones. Yeah, there's some corny ones. They're like things that Sean Connery's James Bond would say, or just James Bond in general. I guess Roger Moore does that too. But it's like some
I lied as he drops him from a
Yeah,
cliff.
guy.
right.
Yeah.
I let him go.
I let
Yeah.
him go.
Don't wake him
Not
up.
I
the
used
Dead
that quote a
tired.
lot when I was
dead
in
tired.
No, I was really into Schwarzenegger for a while there because I really liked Running Man and I loved Predator. I must have seen it like 50, but I missed this one. And
Yeah.
I didn't watch Terminator until years later. I was just too little to get to see movies like this in 80
Oh,
or
okay. All
85.
right. Yeah,
So I
yeah. I'm a
started
little
watching
older
his movies,
than
and it was to the point where like I saw Total Recall opening night. Like I went to see Last
that.
Action Hero like the first day when it came out. And after that, that one I actually didn't think was that bad. I didn't really think that was terrible. But after that, he started being in these like really almost like B movies. There was the one that was like the eighth day or something like that, and there's just 4 or 5. And I remember like not even seeing them. I was like, whoa, why is he in such bad movies all of a sudden? But they were like Commando. They were just the level of quality of Commando. It's just he happened to be in James Cameron's first movie, which was
Mhm.
awesome. And Predator was pretty darn good. It's a pretty good writer of Predator too.
He was in an Amelia's film, Conan the
Conan,
Barbarian.
yeah, I didn't even mention Conan. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
again, I
that
was
really.
too little to see Conan when it came out. I did watch it years later. That's his first movie, right?
He was in some other like Hercules Goes to New
Hmm.
York or something.
Did you say
So
Hercules goes to work? Oh,
New York.
oh, to New York. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
And that
yeah.
was like 78 or 79 or
Okay.
And I think that was actually dubbed. And that was
was
part of
that
the thing
dubbed?
all
Oh,
along was it was because
I think
he
you're
didn't
right.
really have the English
No.
skills to actually
Right.
communicate until
Right.
until later on. And so we started to see that a little bit more with Conan, and then this one he's still using a lot of one-liners, but
Because he's not just German, right? I mean,
no,
he's
he's
not just a German.
Austrian.
I mean,
He's awesome.
he's not just Austrian. He's not like some guy from Vienna. He's like an Austrian guy from some hick town in the mountains somewhere that has like 40 people living in it. So he had a long process of adapting to like learning English and he really did successfully do it. I don't know if I mentioned I'd never seen this one, but this is the first time I've ever seen this. So this has been
Oh.
on my list to watch for a long, long time.
I guess originally this movie was not supposed to be like this. It was supposed to be more about Israeli soldier who'd given up violence, who had, gone out
Yeah. Did you
and
see
they
who it was supposed to be?
no.
It was written for Gene Simmons to play this part. Yeah, that's the
I,
correct. The look on
Huh.
your face is the right
Huh.
reaction.
I'm stunned.
Huh.
What?
Yeah,
Huh.
I don't even know what that means or why that would have ever been an idea for somebody, but he turned it down actually, and then they rewrote it. The guy who wrote 48 Hours
Yeah.
rewrote the script, and so that's how we get what we get. And if you watch it, we just saw 48 Hours not too long ago. This is a lot like 48 Hours. It's sort of like running around the city in the same kind of way. There's a little bit of a buddy dynamic going on.
I
And
was even thinking that scene where they're at that, where they go to the palace, it kind of reminds me of the scene in, well, I guess that would be Beverly Hills, but Cop, but
so there's similarities there too. But the one
yeah.
of the biggest similarities, just watching this movie in a vacuum, if you didn't know anything about the 80s and you watch this movie, there's a steel drum playing throughout
Hmm.
the movie that is insane. That is an insane choice to just have a steel drum going on through the whole movie. It really is baffling if you're doing it in a vacuum. But if you know that I think it's James Horner used that in 48 Hours. And so I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of a surprise about how we're going to vote on this one. I personally don't even think this is, well, it is classic Schwarzenegger because like you said,
Classic Schwarzenegger.
this isn't, but this is not one of his best. This is like below Total Recall and below Predator, below. I actually haven't seen Running Man since I was a kid. I might want to watch that again before I say it's good. I kind of feel like it might be pretty cheesy.
They pull off the cheese a little better.
Yeah. Well, it's also a little bit more interesting of a concept, right? Like just inherently. Anyway, so what do you guys vote? What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't toast it.
I wouldn't toast it as a classic, but I might consider thinking of it as a classic Schwarzenegger movie.
It'd be a
Yeah.
good like drinking
It would
game.
be a good drinking game. Yeah. If you had
For
like an
sure.
old drinking game, this would be a perfect entry into that. Yeah.
Anytime there's a one-liner.
Oh,
Yeah, right.
anytime
Right.
there's a
We're being
one-liner,
wasted.
random feat of strength, every time there's a one-liner, I don't know, every time the girl's characterization gets worse,
Oh my gosh.
something more insane
You know
happens.
that was Tommy Chong's daughter.
I was wondering who that is.
Oh, interesting.
She's not bad. She's not bad.
No,
She's just
she did well with
part
what she
shouldn't,
did.
yeah.
Yeah.
Her part shouldn't be in this movie. That the part should have been written out of the script. It does not belong. It would have been a much more entertaining movie if it was just man against time
Yes.
trying to rescue his daughter without that dynamic because they do not have any.
Well, they needed a pilot, but I guess they could have made him a pilot.
They could have just made him a pilot, right? Like
that would have
why
been
wouldn't
believable.
he be a pilot? He could be a
Right.
pilot.
I mean,
Maybe.
a special forces colonel being able to fly a plane.
is totally plausible. Yeah, that's what when I was asking about the best parts. Now, this unironically, my favorite part of the movie is when he goes to the surplus store and he gets all that
gosh.
gear. That's
Oh, right.
that's fun. That's a fun little fantasy. Like
With the rocket launcher in the surplus store?
yeah,
It's just-
well, I don't- obviously.
I just
Obviously, it
couldn't
was an
figure out where
illegal-
the bulldozer came from.
Yeah.
Like, where did they get that? He's all of a sudden he's like driving this bulldozer into the side.
I mean, presumably there was a bulldozer somewhere, right? I mean, just sitting on a
Just
construction
happened
site
to be
nearby. Yeah.
right
And
next
you
door.
knew how to start it up. You didn't even hotwire. You just drove it, because like you
Yeah.
do.
I definitely would have done like a shot of like his face and noticing the bulldozer and then cut to
Right.
bulldozer smashing down the front. And then you'd get a little bit of humor out of that instead of it just
Yeah.
being like he randomly summoned a bulldozer by casting, summon bulldozer.
Summon bulldozer. Yes.
All right, so none of us is voting for this. I'm not voting for this as a classic. Although if you want to know what the phenomenon that was Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the 1980s, this might be your number one.
Yeah,
Because this one's not genre, right? All the other big ones from him are sci-fi or fantasy. I'm trying to think if because Twins is a comedy. Yeah, I think all the other big ones are sci-fi movies.
This could be argued that this is the first action blockbuster. Like my argument is that's actually First Blood, but
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
but maybe it's a classic action blockbuster. But
That's actually not a bad. That's not a bad point. That actually does make me kind of want to vote for it a little bit more. I hadn't really thought about it in the history of action movies because
But I would argue that First Blood is really the first.
I would argue this is kind of the ultimate of the competition between those two action
This is
film
what
stars.
brought them
Which
to.
really just raised the stakes in the competition between the two
Yeah.
of them, right?
Yeah.
Between Schwarzenegger and Stallone.
I think you're right, though. I think it's Rambo. I think Rambo was the one that opened up this genre to being big money. And to me, the most important thing about that is that it gave the world Die Hard, which is literally one of my favorite movies of all time.
Best.
That's very important. All right, so we're not voting for it, although we do acknowledge its role in the history of the 80s, the history of Arnold, and the history of action movies. That's important, but it's just not very good. It's just not a very good movie. For Toasting the Classics, this is Dave McArthur signing off.
Thanks for having me again, and Bill Hodges.
And I'm Kevin Doyle signing out.
All right, peace out, everybody.